Hi there, thanks for joining this presentation of the Classroom Learning Series with Green and Healthy Schools, Wisconsin. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge our sponsors for this series, Skyward.
Since our humble beginning, small family business, Skyward has evolved into a global technology leader serving more than 2,000 school districts. At Skyward, we are proud to support the initiatives of the Green and Healthy Schools Classroom Learning Series.
Presenting today, we have Kevin Masaryk from the UWSP Center for Watershed Science and Education, and he'll be talking about how we use water in our homes and what the costs are that are associated with that water as far as energy, money, and the water itself.
Hello, welcome to Investigating Home Water Use. My name is Kevin Masaryk. I'm a groundwater education specialist with the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point and University of Wisconsin-Madison Division of Extension. Today's workshop is an initiative sponsored by Green and Healthy Schools of Wisconsin, and we're going to cover an overview of home water use, as well as a little bit of background about where your water comes from, and then a short activity that will help you calculate how much your household spends on showering in a typical year. A little bit of background information. Everyone in Wisconsin uses an average of about 56 gallons of water per person per day. And of that water, about 20% is used on showering. There's another 24% that's used to flush the toilet, 19% for other faucets, 17% for clothes washers. Most of the water that we use on a daily basis isn't actually consumed. It's just water that we use for different daily activities, much of which also goes down the drain. The only water we consume is the water that we use for maybe drinking, or maybe water that we might use for watering our garden. All the other household water uses are water that go down the drain and then require additional treatment. This is important when we start to determine how much we spend on our water use in an average year. Each drop of water that we use has costs associated with it. We don't really pay for the water itself. Rather, we pay for the staff, the equipment, the infrastructure, the water treatment that is necessary to make water safe to drink and be sent to our homes, or make it clean and be disposed of or released back into the environment. So those are the things when we or your parents pay a water utility bill, much of that money goes to paying, again, the staff, the infrastructure to transport it into our homes or away from our homes, as well as the treatment necessary to make it safe to drink or safe to place back into the environment in lakes, rivers, streams, or wetlands. The other cost associated with water is the energy required to heat water to a comfortable temperature. So that's really important when it comes to showering. Many of the other water uses that we may use, such as flushing the toilet, watering the garden, those obviously don't require additional energy to heat the water. But certainly for activities like showering or maybe washing our clothes, heating the water will incur or add additional expense to how much we pay for using that water. For every drop of water we use, we essentially pay twice. We pay once for the treated water, cleaning it up so that it's safe to be brought into our homes. And then again, we pay for that water that we dispose or send to a water treatment plant, where it requires additional treatment to clean it up before it's released back into the environment. The other thing that's important to consider is where your water comes from. Wisconsin is fortunate that we have abundant supplies of water, so we're generally not necessarily concerned about running out of water, but we do have to worry about how clean that water is. And where the water comes from means that sometimes we have to worry about treatment to make sure that it's safe to be brought into our homes. When we look at communities along the Great Lakes, here we see a map or an aerial photograph of Wisconsin. And those areas in red represent communities which get their water from the Great Lakes, or in the case of Oshkosh and Fond du Lac and Appleton, they might get their water from Lake Winnebago. Many of the other communities like Ashland and Superior would get their water from Lake Superior. Communities such as Green Bay, Sheboygan, Milwaukee, those communities along the eastern portion of Wisconsin would actually get their water from Lake Michigan. That represents about 30% of Wisconsin residents that get their water from surface waters. The other 70% would rely on groundwater. They'd rely on wells, either large municipal wells or maybe private wells that pull water out of underground aquifers or underground geologic materials, the water that occupies the empty space or the void space in between soil or sand particles, or occupies cracks or void spaces in the rock below our feet. That's our groundwater. And we would use wells to pull water out of the ground into maybe a water tower where it's basically dispersed throughout that community and into our homes. Knowing where your groundwater, where your water comes from is important because it would determine how much additional treatment is required to make sure it's safe. Groundwater, for instance, because it's water that percolates through the soil, benefits from some natural filtration. Therefore, groundwater is oftentimes a little bit cleaner. It's less, oftentimes less important or less necessary or easier to treat that water to make sure it meets drinking water standards. Surface water, on the other hand, because it's a lot of times influenced by runoff, it's more likely to contain sediment or pathogens or bacteria, is going to require higher or additional levels of treatment sometimes to make sure that it's safe to be brought into our homes. So where your water comes from is really important for determining the quality and additional treatment that might be necessary. And additional treatment would incur or add additional expense. Why is it important to conserve water? Well, we all rely on water. We all need water. We all drink water. We also use water for a whole host of other activities. Many of them are recreational. So if you go boating or swimming or fishing, those are all activities that we enjoy that rely on clean, abundant water supplies. There's also organisms, things like fish or insects, turtles, frogs, other organisms that live and rely on water resources. So making sure that we have clean and abundant water supplies is important for us, but it's also important for all those other critters, all those other organisms that live in water resources, that live in springs and lakes, rivers, streams, and wetlands. Those resources can be harmed if we either pump too much water or use too much water or release or impact the cleanliness of those water supplies. So conserving water is important not only from a quantity standpoint, but the less water we use means the less water that we have to treat. And that ultimately leads to a lot of times a cleaner environment. Lastly, using or conserving water would allow us to save money as well as reduce our overall energy costs. And that's today, part of what we're going to do in this activity is you're going to determine how much each shower you take costs, and then we'll investigate how much money you could save through water conservation measures. So for this activity, the first thing we're going to do is to determine shower flow rate. We're going to focus on the water that we use for showering, and we're going to calculate not only how much water, what the flow rate is, but we'll use that information to calculate how much you spend on a daily basis as well as an annual basis for showering activities. And what you'll need for this activity is a bucket, and that bucket or that container will be used to catch water from the shower. It's important that this bucket be at least 1 gallon. So once you have this bucket, the first thing you'd want to do is determine where is 1 gallon. You could do this in one of two ways. If you had an empty milk jug, empty 1 gallon milk jug, you might fill that jug up, add that water to the bucket, and then mark the top of the water level in that bucket. That would represent 1 gallon. Alternatively, we know that 16 cups, if you have measuring cups in your kitchen, 1 cup, we know that 16 cups, 16 measuring cups would equate to 1 gallon. So if you don't have an empty milk jug, you could use a measuring cup, dump 16 cups of water into that bucket, and then again, mark the top of the water level in that bucket to represent where 1 gallon occurs. The other thing you'll need is a stopwatch or a timer. And many people have cell phones. Many cell phones actually do have a stopwatch built into them. So you could, again, either use a stopwatch or a wristwatch with a stopwatch on it, or you could use the stopwatch on your cell phone or other sort of timing device that would be used to measure how long it takes for the shower to fill that bucket up to the 1 gallon mark. So to do this, the first step would be to determine the shower flow rate. To do this, you're going to need that bucket. You're going to need to turn the shower on, and turn the shower on like you normally would if you were about to take a shower. You don't actually have to take a shower, but you would have to turn the shower on like you normally would when you're about to step in the shower. Next, you're going to have your stopwatch and your bucket handy. You're going to start your stopwatch. And as you start the stopwatch, you want to position the bucket underneath the shower head to capture all that water coming out of that shower head. And you're going to wait to see how long it takes for that water to fill up that bucket to the 1 gallon mark. So here, once the water level reaches that 1 gallon mark, you're going to record that number of seconds that it took to fill that bucket to the 1 gallon mark. And you could do this multiple times if you wanted to get kind of a better estimate or an average of what that shower flow rate would be. Once you have the flow rate, the next thing we're going to do is convert the gallons per seconds into gallons per minute. Gallons per minute is kind of the typical unit of measure that we use when we're talking about shower heads or flow rate from this type of activity. And this is a relatively easy calculation to do. If we know the number of seconds that it took to fill the bucket up to the 1 gallon mark, we're going to assume in this example that it took 30 seconds to fill the bucket up to the 1 gallon mark. To determine the number of minutes, that's the first thing we're going to want to do, is determine the number of minutes that it took. So if we know it took 30 seconds, we know that there's 60 seconds per minute. We can take 30 seconds divided by 60 seconds per minute, and that gives us the time it took in minutes. So 30 divided by 60 equals 0.5 minutes, or half a minute. Once we know that, we can take the gallon, the 1 gallon that we filled, divide by the number of minutes it took to fill that bucket up to the 1 gallon mark. 1 gallon divided by 0.5 minutes equals 2 gallons per minute. So 2 gallons per minute is basically the shower flow rate. That's the information that we need to determine how much we actually spend on our showering activities. So in order to calculate the amount of money that we spend, we're going to use a tool that was developed. It's an Excel calculator, an Excel spreadsheet that does a lot of the math for us. So in order to access that spreadsheet or that calculator, you can either search online for Water Savings Calculator UWSP, or you can use the link that's provided here. Entering that link should take you to the web page where the spreadsheet can be downloaded. And right now I'm going to navigate to that spreadsheet that I have opened up. And from here, we're going to use the information that we calculated or measured to determine how much you or how much your family spends on showering in any given year. So this calculator uses information specific to individual municipalities or utilities. So the important thing is knowing, you'll need to know where you live. And if you know where you live, I'm going to use Stevens Point as the example, because Stevens Point is where I currently reside. So I'm going to navigate down to Stevens Point. If you don't know the water utility of where you live, you might want to ask your parents or your teacher. But as I navigate down here, I finally came down to it, Stevens Point Municipal Water Utility. This is the utility that's responsible for bringing water into my home here in Stevens Point. And when I click on that, I clicked or selected my water utility, what we see pop up is a water rate. That is the amount of money that I spend for every 748 gallons of water that they measure as being sent to my home. And for every gallon of water that is brought into my home, again, not only do I pay for the water, the infrastructure needed to bring it into the home, but I will also pay again because we're assuming that water, again, very little of the water that we use is consumed. Most of it will be sent down the drain. That water will be sent to a sewage or wastewater treatment plant where it requires additional treatment. So you can see I pay $1.58 per 748 gallons of water that come into my home. And then I pay $3.31 for every 748 gallons that's sent down the drain. So that's what I mean when I say we pay twice for every drop of water. We pay once for the water to be brought to our house and once for the water to be treated before it's released back into the environment. And each municipality, if I switch to Stoughton, Sun Prairie, you'll see that those water and sewage rates are adjusted based on where you live. And I'm going to go back to Stevens Point here. So again, $1.58 for the water per 748 gallons, and then $3.31 per 748 gallons to treat that water. The other thing that's important here is what type of hot water heater you have. There's two options. One is gas, one is electric. In my case, mine is a gas water heater. That is important because depending on whether it's gas or electric will determine how much it costs. There's different rates for gas and electricity, and different efficiencies for which one is more efficient or how much energy is needed to heat water if you're using gas or electricity. So that is also incorporated into this calculator. The other pieces of information that you'll need or that might be important are the number of showers, number of people that shower, number of people that live in your household. So if you are in, let's say, a family of 4 people, let's say there's 4 people living in your household, you would select a number 4. If there were only 3 people, you would select a number 3. Why do we have halves? Well, if there were, let's say, 4 people, but only, let's say one of them only showered 3 days out of the week instead of 7 days out of the week, then you might want to use a decimal place to indicate that. So we'll say there's 4 people living in this household. The flow rate is what we measured in the previous activity with the bucket. And if you recall, in our example, it took 30 seconds to fill the bucket up to 1 gallon. We then determined that equated to a 2 gallon per minute flow rate. And that's what I'm going to enter in here. Next, you'll need to know how long you typically shower for. So you could guess, or if you wanted to be more accurate, you might take a stopwatch or start your stopwatch when you enter a shower and then stop it again or check the time after you exit the shower. And if you did this over, let's say, the course of a week, you could average that information together to give you a more accurate representation of how long you typically shower for. In my example, I'm going to say 10 minutes. 10 minutes, that might be kind of a long shower, but we'll use that here as an example. Now that I've entered all that information, the water utility, type of water heater, number of people, flow rate, length of shower, you'll see that this information popped up. These boxes or this table was populated with that information. It basically did that calculation for us behind the scenes. And what we see is that it costs per shower is about 13 cents for the water and an additional 9 cents for the energy needed to heat that water to a comfortable temperature. So every shower that I take in Stevens Point, Wisconsin costs me about $0.22 or 22 cents, just under a quarter for every shower that I take. Annually, if I add up all my showering over the course of the year, assuming I take one shower per day, it comes out to about $80, just over $80. And for my household, a household of 4 people, we spend $325.11 just on showering. Again, that's for the water as well as the energy needed to heat that water to a comfortable temperature. If I switch, let's say I have an electric water heater instead of a gas, we can see that that actually increases those costs. It costs more money to heat water with an electric hot water heater than it does a gas hot water heater. So that is why that is included in this calculation. If we want to look at how much money we could save, we could look at a couple of different activities. One way to save would be to reduce the amount of time spent showering. So if I currently shower for 10 minutes and I'm comfortable reducing my shower length by 2 minutes, so I only shower for 8 minutes, we can see that I would save 4 cents per shower, just over $16 per year. And the household, if everybody decided to do that, would represent a savings of about $65 per year. The other thing that we could do is we could install a low flow shower head or a more efficient shower head. So if our current shower head has a flow rate of 2 gallons per minute, and we installed a new shower head that was more efficient and only used 1.25 gallons per minute, we would be able to recognize or benefit from those added savings, not only of the reduced water use, but also the reduced energy needed to heat that water. And we'd estimate that it would represent a total savings of about $120, just over $120 per year for this household of 4. So again, there's 2 ways that we could save money and reduce water use. One would be to reduce the amount of time spent showering, but probably maybe more easily or more easily achieved would be to install a more efficient shower head, which would basically save us water for every minute that we were in that shower. We could save water while still maybe showering for the same amount of time. If we didn't want to reduce our shower length, then a more efficient shower head would be one way to allow us to perform the same activity while still using less water and still allowing us to save additional money. If we look at how long it would take to recover the cost of a new shower head, let's say a new shower head was $30, we would be able to recover that cost in just under 3 months. So relatively quickly, we'd be able to see savings from that water efficient shower head. So this is one example that allows us to see maybe, is it worth investing in a water efficient appliance, and how long would it take? This is information that might be useful to you as you get older and you build a house or are moving into a house, to see what benefit there might be from conserving water. Again, these are the monetary benefits in addition to the other benefits we talked about from reducing our water consumption. There's another part of the calculator that's used for calculating how much water you could save from a more water efficient toilet. That's kind of an extra credit activity that you could pursue or explore on your own. I'm going to go back to our presentation here, back to the slides. And again, extra credit questions, assuming that you're successful in getting the calculator to work, there's some other questions that you could explore. Is basically, if we know that water costs vary depending on where you live, you could compare your community to some place like Fond du Lac, where the water rates as well as the sewage rates are quite a bit more expensive. Sometimes it's interesting to see how much you'd spend depending on where you live. The other thing, or the other question that you could investigate, is to calculate again how much water you spend on toilet flushing versus showering. Both showering and toilet flushing, in terms of the percent of household water use, were relatively similar in terms of the percent. I think it was 20% for showering, 24% of the water we use is used for toilet flushing. But through this calculator, you could determine whether it's more cost effective to invest in a shower head or more cost effective to invest in a more water efficient toilet, and then dive into it a little bit and figure out why that is. Sometimes it's useful or important to know why the cost for showering is more expensive than, let's say, the cost for flushing a toilet. That helps us to decide if we have limited money to invest in, let's say, more efficient appliances, whether it's going to be more cost effective to do that for a new shower head or more cost effective to invest in a new toilet. So with that, that's a very simple, hopefully simple activity that will allow you to explore water use in your home. If you have any questions about this activity, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I've listed my phone number as well as my email address. I'd be happy to talk through any questions that you have. Alternatively, if you're looking for more water-related activities for yourself or your students, please feel free to visit our webpage, Center for Watershed Science and Education, where we have a number of water-related, groundwater-related activities, classroom activities that you can incorporate into your classroom or your lesson plan. So with that, thank you very much, and I look forward to hearing from you.
Okay, now it's your turn. I hope that you'll use this activity and figure out how much water you're using at home and what the costs are, or maybe share it with somebody else you know that might be interested in doing this activity as well. I'd also like to mention that Focus on Energy offers free energy savings packs for people who live at residences where they are in a participating utility as a customer, and that includes just about everybody in the state. So check out this webpage, and some of those packs include a free low flow shower head, so you can reduce your water use at home without any cost to you at all. Thanks again for joining today for the Classroom Learning Series, and I hope you check out all of our videos in this series. Have a great day.